What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katrina Valentin. Welcome to this latest episode in the podcast adventure, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. And today we have a returning guest, Dr. Dain Heer. And Dain is an energy virtuoso, best-selling author, speaker, and possibility seeker. He is also the co-creator of Access Consciousness and a brilliant body whisperer. And when we first met, I was basically a brain on legs. And the first session I had with you changed everything I thought I knew about bodies and energies. And that exploration is still ongoing. So before we dive in, I would just like to thank you for inviting my body to come alive.
Oh my goodness, talk about a great pleasure. You know, when you see somebody who functions that way, but simultaneously is willing to receive with their body energetically, it's always a great gift to help them and facilitate them in awakening that aspect of them and their being in this experience we call life and living here. You know, because it makes it so much richer, you know, having this sense of this beautiful creature being alive and it's with us all the time just changes everything.
Yeah, the beautiful creature being our body.
Yes, and us, but that's a story for another time. That's another conversation.
The whole big other conversation, getting to our being. And well, today we are going to talk about body whispering, which is the title of your latest, most recent book. The whole title is actually Body Whispering, a New Way of Seeing, Being, and Healing. So what is body whispering all about? Who is a body whisperer?
Well, here's the thing is we're all body whisperers. This book was written for people, specifically for people with bodies. So, and it really does apply to all of us. Now, some people know that it's a skill that they have or a skill that they would like to learn more of, but it's not even a skill as much. It's something that can be practiced. It's something that can be honed, but it's something we all have and something we've ignored for a very long time and something that hasn't ever been given very much value. And so, you know, even people in different seekers of the world have never been really taught to embrace the value of your body in awareness, embrace the value of your body in change, and more importantly, embrace the gift of your body in bringing joy to your world. Because why do we have bodies? To enjoy what bodies can do that beings can't. You know, if you didn't have a body, you'd never get to taste ice cream. If you didn't have a body, you couldn't feel the sun on your skin or the ocean spray on your face. If you didn't have a body, how are you going to orgasm? Hello? I mean, these things are here and we treat them as though they're a reason we're limited. And in actuality, it's our refusal to listen to them that creates us not getting the greatness that they are showing us that they actually have access to in a different way than we do.
It's so funny how even when I was looking at the questions for this podcast, the joy, I didn't even have a question about joy. It's like one of the most forgotten parts. The first thing that you bring up, that joy of being embodied, the joy of actually being alive, like I was talking about. So I was looking in the book and you talk about 3 ways of getting started on body whispering. And they're like understanding that you're infinite, start asking, start listening, and be patient.
Yes.
So if you just talked a little bit more of those, but also maybe include that joy part, because I get that could be a fourth part there for even getting started.
Yes. So let's talk about the infinite part first. So right now, just close your eyes if you can. If you're listening in a car, please don't close your eyes. But you can still do it, which is interesting. Just expand out a mile or a kilometer in all directions. And now 10 miles in all directions. Now 100 miles in all directions. And I do it really fast because as soon as you ask, you do. You don't have to visualize it. Okay, now 100 miles in all directions. Now 1,000. Now 10,000. Now 50,000, which is bigger than the Earth. Now 200,000. Now 250,000, which actually reaches out to the moon. Notice what it's like to be space, and that much space. If I asked you to go out 1,000,000 miles in all directions, 1,000,000,000 miles in all directions, notice you could go there too. Could a being that big fit inside of a body this small? And the answer, of course, is no. And so you can open your eyes, but I do that to point out two things. Number one, we relax when we occupy more space. Number two, a being that big could not fit inside of a body this small, which means that you are not inside your body is inside of you. And you are not your body is not you. You should have a great connection, but beings and bodies have different functions. They have different purposes and they have different capacities. And we have been lumping them together as though I am my body, which does two things. It limits the being and it limits the body. Why? Because it limits a being, because if the being believes they only have access to and connection to those things that they can physically touch or address, they're missing 99.99999999999% of what the being has available, because the being is actually infinite, which means it has a presence with and a connection to every molecule and every element in the universe, quite literally. Now, that's huge. You hear that and most people's their minds can't compute it, but that's exactly it. Your mind is not you. Your mind is way too small to compute what you, the being, have as a capacity. And we have been lumping us and our body together, which has been creating the idea that we are just our mind and we are only the space of our body, which creates a dynamic sense of contraction. Because if you're an infinite being, infinite means as big as the universe itself, or as big as everything that exists if there's multiverses, etc. That's a concept that's been talked about in different circles, if you will, conscious circles, spiritual circles, whatever. And what's funny is science is now coming around to that acknowledgement. And it's funny because we've been talking about that in Access for 30 years, and science is finally starting to begin to barely catch up, even though they still don't get it. But so what this is about is getting to what is, not what we mentally think is and what we mentally believe must be. So the idea then is, what can we explore, and how can we explore it using the awareness and the tools that we have? And Access Consciousness gives us a whole upgrade in the tool set. But how can we explore it from what we have learned, what we have been, what we have experienced, what we have lived, to get that there is a being that has a lot more available, and thereby freeing our body to be what it's great at, which is experiencing all the physical elements, all the physical sensations of reality, and doing it in a way that's really easy, which is what the book is about. The book is not, so, I started kind of big here. Here you are, you're an infinite being, now what? That's not the way the book goes. It has that thread running through it, but not in a way that you need to comprehend. But from the perspective of, would an infinite being function as this with their body? And if not, then we have different choices. And so what this is really about is getting us to the place and space of having different choices with our body, that where our being can contribute to our body, and our body can contribute not only to our being, but to our sense of living and our joy of living. And so already people's brains are probably frying, which is appropriate, where your mind is like, I can't keep up. Stop talking. I don't understand. Yeah, but understanding is one of the greatest limitations you function from. Understanding and the need to understand eliminates miraculousness. It eliminates magic. It eliminates possibilities that are out there that the universe knows are possible, but because you don't understand them, you won't let them in. So to a certain extent, the Body Whispering book, by using your body, starts to break apart or melt or shake apart that paradigm that keeps us in this tiny box where we're a tiny being in a tiny body with a tiny mind running it all. And then magic occurs.
Wow. Okay, that was like the first one, understanding that you're infinite. And then you start, I'm like,
You're like, okay, is there anywhere to go from there?
exactly. So once you understand you're infinite, is that when you start asking and listening, if you haven't already, maybe turn it up?
Well, that's what is part of what allows you to turn it up, because if you get that you're infinite, and by the way, you can't understand that you're infinite, you can perceive it and be willing to allow that awareness. You can be aware of it. Okay. And I say that because it's beyond understanding, which is why people don't believe it and why it's not already a part of people's realities, because it's not understandable. But from that space of being willing to explore that there's this other possibility that could exist, and using the tool that what's true always makes you lighter and a lie makes you heavier, and exploring from what's light, and not needing to go down the rabbit holes of what's heavy and try to figure it out, it gives you a way of navigating this path to a different possibility. And asking is one of the greatest gifts we have, asking questions. Because a question always opens up another doorway of possibility. A question always empowers, an answer disempowers. And so it's our ask that like when we have an undefined ask, an ask for a different possibility. Like if you were to ask right now, what is possible for me and my body to be together that I've never imagined could exist, that would be way more fun than anything we've ever had? And you notice you kind of relax, and you kind of also, you send your energetic feelers out a little bit to like, ooh, what would be more fun than anything we've ever had? Oh my God, I never thought of that before. But what we don't realize is everything that has ever been created in this world that didn't exist before began with a concept of possibility followed by a question. Or it began with a question for possibilities, followed by that concept, followed by more questions, and then choices to institute it. So, for example, before the computer existed, somebody was like, well, there's got to be a different way of doing this. And it was like, okay, well, then what is possible that I've never considered that will accomplish this result? You know, and watch The Imitation Game, friggin' brilliant movie. And you see all the things that the guy and the people creating it went through to make it happen and all this sort of stuff. But you realize before his idea, it didn't exist. He had this inkling of awareness of a possibility. And then he asked, okay, what is it going to take to create this? And we limit ourselves so dynamically in this world that we live in because we keep only looking for possibilities in the realm of what other people have already chosen. That's not where possibilities exist. Possibilities exist in a realm of what has not yet been chosen, what has not yet been actualized. And you know, for those of us that are seekers, we get really excited just by that conversation, just by those words, because it's like, yeah, that's where I want to live. I want to live in possibilities that haven't actualized, and I want to find out how to actualize them, how to bring them to the world. And then imagine being that with your body. Things that have never existed, or that most of us don't know can exist, actually being able to show up as our daily living, breathing reality. That is part of the gift of asking. And also, that is where we get to explore the unexplored. This is where we get to open up new realms and new possibilities.
So that was one of the most brilliant ways I've heard you describe how to actually get to the undefined question, to the question that actually is for possibility and not for looking at something somebody already has and then asking for it. So you also have this be patient. What is that about?
So we have this idea that instant gratification indicates that we are on the right track and we're on the right path. And yet the way the universe works is in its own timing. People call it divine timing, but I've never found that anything I've ever asked of divinity has provided nearly as much as that which I've asked of consciousness. So look at it however you will, however works for you. But the entire universe is conscious, which means every element, every elemental is connected. And Einstein proved this, and it travels, and the connection between them is instantaneous. It travels faster than the speed of light, which is pretty fast. Okay, and so what happens is when you ask, that request goes into quite literally the entire universe, not just the space around you, not just your house, the universe, this big thing in which we live. And from my point of view, the entire universe is conscious. Every element, every molecule has consciousness. This is one of the things Einstein talked about also. And so what we don't realize is the gift of our request is that it is heard by the entire universe. And the factor, if you want to call it the limiting factor or the deciding factor in how and when it shows up, is when we are willing to be that which we have asked for. And it's basic quantum physics, but we don't need to go into the quantum physics. It's also basic consciousness. If you're willing to be something, you can have it. If you're willing to be something, you can receive it. But what we also don't recognize is we keep seeming to ask for things and we go, okay, is it there? Is it there? Is it there? And when can I have it? Is it there? And when can I have it? Is it there? And when can I have it? It's not the way it works. Some of these things the whole universe needs to rearrange itself for that to show up. And so what happens is our request actually starts shifting the universe. It's part of the gift of us. And if we would make more requests, more in the direction of those things we desire, we would have a lot more of that showing up in the universe if we're willing to be patient, because we have no idea what is going to have to change for that to occur. Our mind thinks it knows what's going to have to change, but let's face it, it doesn't. It's too small. It's not connected enough. It's a computational system. It's not big enough to encompass the workings of the universe. And what I found is the people that get more connected with them, the people that get more connected with their bodies, the people that have more of a sense of oneness with everything, have a level of patience that is astounding, because they know that it's not about, if it's not showing up, I'm doing something wrong. If it's not showing up, it's because of because if it's not showing up, it's because it hasn't shown up yet. And there may be other choices and other changes I need to make to allow it to show up. Patience is one of the greatest kindnesses we can give ourselves and our bodies.
And there's another part of that actually kind of goes into the patience. A lot of people talk about the importance of loving and accepting your body. And you talk more about having allowance for your body. What is the difference?
Do you really want to hear my answer on that one?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Love is judgment. Okay. And we talk about unconditional love as though there's a concept that exists with love without judgment. And in actuality, if you have unconditional love as a concept, then you also have to have conditional love as a concept that you're trying to overcome with unconditional love. So what I found is gratitude bypasses all of that. And gratitude is always a space of more. And so when we get to gratitude, and then the other idea is allowance for our bodies. Allowance is the space beyond judgment. Allowance is a space where there is no alignment and agreement, meaning there's no positive polarity. There's no resistance and reaction, meaning there's no negative polarity, if we want to describe it in those terms. And what it is where everything is an interesting point of view. So if we look at that for a moment, how often have we been told that the solution is to love your body? And so you love your body for a while until it doesn't do what you want. And then you judge it even more because you're like, I loved you. Why didn't you do what you were supposed to based on my love of you? Which, is also, I would laugh at that but that's what you see people do in relationships of all kinds. And we have a relationship with our body. What we should have, or what we could have, is actually a communion with our body. Communion is not the wine or wafer. Communion is where there is no separation and no need or impetus nor desire to judge. It is where you perceive the beauty of what is in front of you. You also perceive the insanity of what is in front of you with absolutely no point of view and no need to try to change something. Even though there are lots of things with our bodies we'd like to change, the way of doing that is not by falsely loving it, which is our body's smart enough to know it perceives the energy of judgment behind it. You're like, I'm going to try to love it so it won't look so chubby today. And your body's like, sorry, I'm aware. You still think I'm chubby. I'm going to be chubby. Because the weird part is your body gives you more of what you judge. So when you go, oh my God, my butt is so saggy. It's like, oh, you want a saggy butt? Okay. Because judgment is such an intense energy. And so allowance is where from a request, allowance is the only space from which you can make a true request. And our bodies are like we are, they're conscious organisms. So when you ask them something from a real request, like body, what would it take to change the saggy butt? Body, what would it take to change the wrinkles? Not from judgment, but this is a concept that is brilliantly laid out in the book that walks you through this and gives you the pieces you need at just the moment you need it to assuage your doubt and actually keep going on the journey, which I love. But it's like, this is such a different concept that most people, even to begin to try to wrap their heads around it, it's like, I'm trying, I'm trying on something different, I'm trying, but it's not working. Because it's so different than the way we were brought up. So what this is about, this allowance idea, is where everything is an interesting point of view. One of the things you could do is you could take maybe just right now the top one area that you've been judging in the last week or two with your body, lower your walls and barriers, and just get the sense of that judgment or that thing that provokes it, or that judgment plus the thing that provokes it, plus the judgment, plus the energy that sticks in your world or in your body as a result of it. Just get all of that, and from a place of just total allowance, lower your walls and barriers and just go, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. And you may notice with just a few times like that, it starts shifting. Well, so let's do it a couple more times. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. And I'm saying point of view. Okay? Because when you take a fixed point of view, you compress yourself into a point from which you view the world. You are no longer the universe viewing the world. So once again, interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. Interesting point of view. I have this point of view. And for those of you that actually did it, what happened?
Relaxation.
Yeah. Relaxation, and that thing that felt like a boulder in the stream kind of melts. And now your stream is flowing again, and that sort of stuck energy around it, or that point of view that you made real at some point, sort of melts. That's the gift of allowance. And if you'll notice, see, for me, I got to start on the journey of learning or becoming aware of all these concepts in the Body Whispering book when I started working energetically with bodies for the first time. And it was amazing to me that I could be an energy that would melt these things that were creating physical and emotional and psychological problems. And I would be it because, think about it. Isn't it easier to be an allowance of somebody else and their problems and their judgments and their body and where they're judging themselves? And it was, and it was so easy. But by being that, I could be something that would change the energetic structure into the flow and release it into flow again, kind of like we just did. This that we just did is an amazing element of the magic we have with bodies. But it's also an amazing element of the magic that we are with beings, where we can be present with something and get out of the monkey mind and choose to be something different and be a space and a presence that changes things. And you may notice whatever area of your body you had that point of view about, you may notice it feels different. A lot of times it'll feel softer, and you'll touch it and you'll be like, wow, it doesn't hurt as much. And you're like, whoa. And to realize that that was all we did, we took 2 minutes and got present and made a choice and used a tool and got more present and more present, and we're being something that created the change. This is why I say us being with our bodies and us getting us as a being and being willing to be that and be willing to have our body and the brilliance of it creates magic.
Thank you. That was amazing, just to tap into that and relax in basically relaxing into the change. And what you described as that, the point of view being stuck in the stream, so no water can pass by it, then actually listen to this other question I had. Because working with bodies over the years, I've noticed that we're often quite willing to start asking questions about food and maybe clothes and things like that. But however, when it comes to pain, most of us kind of go into this, we go all deaf. And the only thing we're willing to hear is how to get out of the pain. So what is going on there? What happens and what could be different?
Well, it's in the very nature of what pain actually is. And one of the things that I found, one of the things I got the information on years ago, decades ago, was that actually pain is an intensity that you're refusing to have or be. And looking from that place, it's kind of like looking from the other places and spaces we've talked about, can just sort of untwist or twist your whole world, depending on whether you're willing to have it or fight against it, because you're like, no, it's, well, let's just hear me out for a moment. If we look at this from this possibility, that pain is actually an intensity you're unwilling to have, then by its very nature, we would try to avoid and get away from it. And yet, have you ever met a woman who had a natural childbirth with no painkillers?
Well, I have a few, but there are not a lot of them around.
Yeah, there aren't, because and we're taught to live in a world where avoid pain at all costs, which is funny because there's so many people in so many different types of pain. But if they weren't avoiding it, if they would lower their walls and barriers, and if they would, instead of avoiding it, embrace it and be really, really present with it, there's a level of intensity there that most people believe will kill them, which is why they avoid it. So there's this intensity that they're avoiding. To a certain extent, this conversation is slightly a little bit taken out of the context it requires, but we don't really have time to give it the full context it requires. So I'm presenting a different possibility and just acknowledge that, like, look, this is not complete. So please don't resist it based on it's not complete. But if we look at that for a moment, then we recognize, why do people go deaf? Why do people, because pain is the one thing they're not willing to be present with. But here's the interesting part is, before our bodies give us pain is our body's last resort to get us to listen to something. Before they give us pain, they've been whispering to us usually for years, and we have not been hearing the whispers. So finally, it's like, let me give you something you can't avoid nor ignore. And if we truly get that our bodies have awareness, we truly get that our bodies actually have our backs and are our backs, I guess, to a certain degree, then we recognize our body's not doing it against us. Everything our body does is for us. There is nothing our body does that is against us. There's a lot that we do against them. So we assume that they do it against us, because you always assume the worst that you're doing to somebody else is what they're doing to you. Okay. And so our bodies are actually like, look, you need to listen to this. This has gotten to emergency situation here, for one example. Or we'll get hurt, we get a physical thing, we get kicked. Like I got kicked by a horse in my knee. And I mean, a full force horse was up on both front feet and kicked back with both back feet directly into my knee that was in the stirrup. And it was a level of pain that I had never experienced before. I thought I literally screamed, and I had never heard, people around me were like, I have never heard anyone scream like that before. And I was like, I have never screamed like that before. And, you know, I saw stars and I was like, okay, I may pass out here. And I went, okay, hold on. And here I was too far away from the barn to walk back. So I'm like, I'm going to climb back on the horse and ride, as you do. And what happened was I got more present with the pain. And I noticed that there was a universe of energy there. And I was like, whoa. And I really wanted to avoid it. And I'm like, I gotta walk my talk here. I gotta at least try this, even if it kills me. And I walked. And so we got back to the place we were staying. And I had to have people literally carry me into the house because I could put no weight on the leg. And I know as a chiropractor, you know, all the ligaments and all the tendons in the knee, and when they are shattered, you know, when the bone is broken, and also when the ligaments are torn, and they were. So I lay down on the bed. I have some really good friends start to work on me who do these access consciousness tools. We have things called body processes that allow you to change different things. And I also, in my own world, noticed I was really trying to avoid the pain. I had them put some ice on it and to get a little numbing there. And then I went into the pain. And it was excruciating. But I noticed it got worse when I tried to pull out and avoid it. And it was excruciating, but I kept trying to get into it more and be present with it more and walk into it more and walk into it more. And I thought I was going to pass out at one point. And at one point I thought I was pretty convinced I was probably going to die from this thing. Okay. And then there was a point that I crossed where it was like I had become the universe. I cannot explain it. Sounds totally bizarre to anybody listening, but it gave me some dynamically different awareness that previous to that I could not have gotten, nor was I willing to have. 45 minutes later, I got up and I was able to walk on that friggin' knee. Okay. I went to my chiropractor at the time, and when I got home a week later, and was walking on it the entire week and even riding after 2 days or 3 days. And I went to him and he said, well, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Because all I told him was I got kicked in the knee. And he's like, okay, well. And previous to us doing that work and me going into this thing instead of avoiding it, I had all of those things. I had torn ligaments front and back and sideways. I went into the pain, got access body processes. I was also running some verbal processes and changed it in 45 minutes with the help of some magical people who were willing to allow this miracle to occur also. So I say that because, and I'm not preaching here. Please know that. I know that there are people that are in levels of pain and have been in levels of pain for a long time. And please know I'm not saying, oh, well, do this and you'll get over it. Or, oh, I found the way out, or I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong in any way. Please know I'm not saying that. Please, 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 please. I'm giving you one example based on the question, but based also on the idea that it's our initial avoidance that creates so many of the reasons why our body gives us pain. That is not our fault. That is not our body's fault. That is nobody's fault. Our body's doing its best. We're doing our best. This is just a different way of approaching things that might open up different possibilities for us and our bodies.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. And it's really where you went into allowance.
That.
Yeah.
Wow. And I realize a lot of people believe that it's one of the reasons people will not choose allowance, because they're afraid that they're going to have to experience something that they won't be in control of. But allowance is where you finally are willing to be out of control, out of definition, out of limitation, out of form, structure, and significance. And it creates a space where you no longer resist what is possible. You no longer resist what can show up, because it's our resistance that our body shows us so much of, by creating pain, by creating disease, by creating stuckness and not moving very well and lack of fluidity. And it's actually allowance that we've been taught to avoid, that is actually where the beauty and the flexibility in life comes in, where you know you can handle anything because you know it's not bigger than you. And even if it kills you, it's like, okay.
Thank you. And we're actually out of time at that. So I would really, if anything in this podcast has inspired you or intrigued you or even made you angry, go and check out
I'm
this.
good at that.
Yeah, because it could be that's, your being showing you an intensity that actually is guiding you on to checking all of this out even more. And the book, you can find the book on bodywhispererbook.com. It'll be in the description of the podcast as well. And it is one of those books that really takes you by the hand and walks you through all of the things that Dain has been talking about, and way more than that. And it's years in the making, right? It's like been a book that's been trying to take itself out in the world for like the past 5 to 10 years.
And more. Yes, absolutely. And I say that again, you don't have to feel like you get any of the concepts that we talked about. That's the whole point of it. You don't have to have a PhD before you do this. It's like probably even better if you don't just come to it with no point of view. And it walks you by the hand. You could just pick it up off the street having none of this awareness or knowledge. And that's the gift, and really the target of it is to walk you by the hand in a very easy way to get to this place of having a way different space with your body and actually liking it and having it be ease.
Enjoy. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. Goodbye for now, and bye everyone. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katrinavalentin.com/wolf.